Krsna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda.
Hare Krishna, welcome. We are reading Bhagavad-gita. This channel is called Bhagavad-gita. Here it is, because we're reading Bhagavad-gita as it is. And my name is Lavangalatika. Bhagavad-gita is translated and commented by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Today we are testing a new camera, but we hope everything will work even better than usual. We are in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad-gita, which is called Jnana Yoga. Jnana means meditation, and yoga means connecting to the Supreme. There are many different yoga methods, and Bhagavad-gita is a little bit structured, so we are always aiming for the Supreme Absolute Truth, but we, come at it from different angles over the Bhagavad-gita. And I'm reading text 5. Udharer atmanatmanang natmanam avasadyayet atmeva yatmano bandhur atmeva ripuratmanaha. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Yeah, so the mind is an interesting concept. There are a few things. We have made so much scientific advancement in the world. We understand many things in its complexity and depth in a way that we haven't done before. There are some things that are extremely difficult to study in a scientific sense. Among them, the mind, consciousness, memory, these sort of things that you cannot measure. You cannot come from the outside in an objective way and study them, because they are on the inside of you. And therefore, if we want to understand the mind, of course we have so many studies of psychology, and in many ways we may have a certain ability to understand how the mind works, but understanding it from within, from the level of the soul and outwards, then we need to come to Bhagavad-gita. Then we actually need to practice some form of yoga. And what it says here, the mind is can be the friend of the conditioned soul, or it can be our enemy. Because the mind is a little bit like that. If we are not in charge of our mind, the mind can make life very difficult. But if we can find a yoga method of being like telling the mind that you are not the boss of me, I am the boss of you, then the mind is very helpful. I will read the purport. The word Atma denotes body, mind and soul, depending upon different circumstances. In the yoga system, the mind and the conditioned soul are especially important. Since the mind is a central point of yoga practice, Atma here refers to the mind. The purpose of the yoga system is to control the mind and to draw it away from attachment to sense objects. It is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mire of nescience. In material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind and the senses. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with a false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature, and in this way the conditioned soul may be saved. Yes. So, of course, if you have been reading Bhagavad-gita up to this point, either by following our channel or by being a serious student on your own, then these terms are very, matter of fact. We are familiar with them. If we see the mind as our thought process and ourselves as that conglomerate of senses and ideas and desires, then this doesn't really make sense. How do we differentiate between the ego and the mind and the senses and ourselves? Oh, that's what yoga is all about. That's actually what yoga is all about. It's like this existence in this material world, our position within this body, with its senses, and with our mind and so on. It's a little bit like virtual reality. We step into this body and the connection is seamless. We don't even notice where we begin and where the body, where we end and the body begins. What is our real consciousness and what is our experience through our senses. And therefore, somebody showed me a clip of this lady who, her kids put one of these virtual things over her face. She was watching something and it was kind of scary. So she grabbed the dog and wanted to hug the dog. And after a while, the kids were saying, "Mom, you're holding the dog upside down." And that's us in this material world. We're experiencing something, but we don't fully understand our connection to it. And we don't fully understand the nature of reality because we are so much conditioned by the impact of this material world, seeing it through our senses of this body. And there the mind is very important because the mind kind of puts together the input from the senses and presents an idea. Oh, there is ice cream over there. We just heard the ice cream truck driving by. The ears immediately go and say, "There's ice cream over there, or there's sunshine over there, and there are wasps over there. Go there, avoid that." Because you are the body, and these senses, whatever they tell us, this is the reality that we have to react to immediately. And then we become entangled here, and the glitter of material nature. It's really like that. When we want to focus on something, and then something passes by us, and we go, "Oh, shiny," and we forget all about what we are doing. And this material world is just one "oh, shiny" on top of the other. And if we want to focus on spiritual self-realization, then especially when we are discussing this dhyana yoga, this yoga system of meditation, the most important part of yoga meditation is, of course, the mind. We need to focus the mind on something spiritual. And in order to do that, we need to train the mind. And in order to train the mind, we may opt for a different environment that doesn't have so much distraction to it. But in order to do that, we have to understand the point in doing that. If we're thinking, well, I'm very fond of all my shiny things, I don't see the need to separate myself from them, then such a person will not do yoga. Simple as that. But we are in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad-gita. We already know this. I am the eternal living soul inside the body, and I forget words sometimes. My potential is so much greater than the limits of this body. Like this body is really funny. Like the Sphinx said, which is that living entity that in the childhood walks on 4 legs, in the grown-up stage on 2 legs. No, that's not how the Sphinx said. Then it would have been easy. In the morning walks on 4 legs, in the daytime walks on 2 legs, and in the evening walks on 2 legs. Very confusing. It's the human being. Baby crawls on 4 legs. A grown-up can walk steadily on 2 legs, and an old person may have to rest on a cane, and thus having kind of 3 legs. And then you die. And in the middle there is of course a scope when we are more or less at our top potential, but it's still limited by this body. And then the body dies. And it may seem a little, cold to denote the whole human experience to just the birth and the death and the problems in between. Of course, there is a lot of wonders in this world, and there's a lot of pleasurable, enjoyable moments throughout our life. But still, we want to have full knowledge of the situations that we can make the best informed choices in our lives. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted by sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. The best way to disentangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. The word he is used to emphasize this point, the point that one must do this. It is also said, Mana eva manushyanang karanang bandhamokshayo bandhaya vishayango bandhaya vishayasango muktye nirvishayang manaha. For man, mind is the cause of bondage and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from the sense objects is the cause of liberation. Amrita Bindu Upanishad. Therefore, the mind which is engaged in Krishna consciousness is the cause of supreme liberation. So liberation actually means we have a free choice. We are not bound by this reaction to take one birth after another, to be in one illusion after another. So liberation is kind of like the neutral stage. Then Krishna consciousness means we are not just aiming for liberation, to get free from the material existence. We are aiming to realize the complete reality. What is on the other side of liberation? What does spiritual reality mean? So Krishna explains, well, not so, it's touched upon in the Bhagavad-gita, but we hear more about it in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There is a world that is eternal, and we have a home there along with Krishna. As long as we are in this condition where we identify with the bodily concept of life, where we are aiming to enjoy through our senses, then there is no entrance to the spiritual world. So that is what liberation means, to disconnect, to disentangle ourselves, to put away the virtual reality glasses so that we can see reality as it is. And the mind is a key player in that game, because if the mind is absorbed of the senses, then it's just like living in a commercial TV channel where whatever program you want to watch is constantly interrupted by this advertisement. Yes, buy this, eat this, do this. That's our mind. That's our mind. And we become distracted and we become drawn to all these things. And we forget that we have an eternal spiritual existence. So in spiritual life, in yoga, but particularly when it comes to jnana yoga, it is impossible to do jnana yoga with an uncontrolled mind. So the first step towards controlling the mind is to understand, why should I control the mind? So if we understand that I'm not my mind is a function. My mind fills a function, of course, but I'm in charge of my mind does not control me. And therefore yoga includes many techniques for this, in this regard, to control the mind. But Bhakti yoga, we use techniques also, but ultimately when you come to the reality of a spiritual consciousness, it is beyond technique. Then it is a question of love and attraction. Then it is a fact that as a spirit soul, so in this jnana yoga process, it's all mechanical. We have practices, we have ways to control the mind in a very structured way, in order to come to that place where the soul can be undisturbed by the mind, and thus focus on spiritual activity. With Krishna consciousness, Bhakti yoga, although it is helpful to have a peaceful environment, to avoid certain things, to set up one's life in a certain way, we are not dependent on the mechanical, because in order to focus on spiritual life, we are not dependent on being able to fully control the mind at first. We start by focusing on Krishna consciousness. So Krishna is so attractive that when we hear his name, when we hear about his activities, when we hear about his qualities, then the mind will naturally be drawn to that. We are still doing yoga, but this yoga is not mechanical. This yoga is based on the understanding that the soul is naturally in a relationship to Krishna. The soul has a natural capacity of loving Krishna, and when that love comes forth, the mind becomes inconsequential. But when we're in the middle, we have started our process but we haven't finished it, it's very helpful to understand the nature of the mind, and also to understand how to train the mind to become our best friend. That is what we want to do. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for watching. We aim for updates every Tuesday and Friday. Please come back. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down there. We also have some links and information for you. And there is, of course, the subscribe button. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
I'm a Hare Krishna, and I approve this message. Subscribe.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.